Hello and welcome to MLW Confusion. I'm your host Rob Cameron, bringing you all that you may or may not need to know about Major League Wrestling and its television programming. No tricks, all treats in store for you today. I guess today's November 1st, but either way, it's close enough to Halloween. I think it's technically Halloween when I'm recording this chunk of it. But the important thing is, got a special guest in the studio, Ace Darling, independent legend, fixture of the Aftermag's first winner of the ECWA Super 8 tournament, is coming by. Going to be awesome. Got a chance to talk to him for quite a while, and only, the most important chunks made it onto this here podcast. Of course, cool guy, full an amazing career, and worked with a veritable who's who of professional wrestling, both on the independent scene and in the WWE, WWF at the time, and WCW as well. Got like 2 shots at the tag team championships, so crazy go nuts on that front. But first, let's talk about the news, shall we? Once again, we are going to talk about Lucha Apocalypto, MLW Lucha Apocalypto. They are still technically rounding out the YouTube beIN Sports portion of the card, not the main Apocalypto show. I don't think this has a name yet. I haven't looked terribly hard because, let's be realistic here, people. MLW's not doing, despite being gone for 6 weeks, not putting out too much more stuff outside of just like rando press releases and rando matches, or match announcements, excuse me. It'd be more interesting if they put out rando matches, but they haven't done a whole lot on that front. But they've announced 3 matches for Lucha Apocalypto's undercard, and the first of which is Gigi Ray versus Delmi Exo. On paper, should be a great match. Always great to see the featherweights in action. My only complaint, and it's not even a complaint about the match, it's just, are we going to address that Gigi Ray and Renee Michelle had a confrontation on MLW TV, and just kind of fell off the face of the earth on that one. This conflict was a handful of months ago, and nothing's followed up. So, it's easy for me to be skeptical based on match listings alone, but we'll see if this gets addressed this coming, not this coming week, but next week or so. Also announced Kevin Knight is pulling double duty, except this time, unfortunately for him, he has drawn the short end of the stick and getting Donovan Dijak, who's looking to continue his hijack of MLW with Mr. Saint Laurent. On paper, though, once again, this should be an amazing match. Knight's already shown that he can bring it. Dijak has got something to prove since him being let go from the WWE, and continuing to put bangers on all over the country as well. So I'm excited to see how this match will turn out. An interesting clash of styles, if you will. But also, once again, unanswered questions. Bomaye, is he? Is he not? I don't know. We'll find out, I guess. And last but not least, it is announced that Contra Unit's Akira Kwan will be battling Okamura. More people targeting the Contra Unit, especially these two have a history as Contra took the tag team titles away from Kozimax. So that is the latest news off of that card. These matches also include our favorite fast food breakfast sandwich battling Minoru Suzuki, the other half of the tag team champions. Kenta battling Paul London, which is also an interesting match that was not on my bingo card to be had. The 2 aforementioned matches on here, headlined hopefully by the Weapons of Mass Destruction match with Akira and Mads Kruger, which low-key could be the match of the night if they just let these 2 guys go crazy with the weapons, because both of them excel in the deathmatch brawling environment. So fingers crossed they're just let those 2 just pop off and just almost kill each other. And last but not least, Satoshi Kojima defends the MLW Heavyweight Championship against Bobby Fish. All right, let's talk about the latest elephant in the room here before we go off to break. News dropped today at the time of this recording. Eric Bischoff is coming to MLW. He is going to be the kayfabe booker of MLW One Shot. That's coming December 5th at the Melrose Ballroom in NYC. Curious signing. I know Paul Walterhauser popped up on Bischoff's podcast, and I didn't quite listen to it, I'm not gonna lie, but this is an interesting move. And like, frankly, as a biased spectator upon this, like, I'm really just fingers crossed that Bischoff is either A, this is a one shot, pun intended fully, of course, or, this is just strictly an on-screen role for him. I'm not a big fan of his booking philosophy. I don't think it's aged any better in the 30 years since he last ran a successful company. Accidentally went there. But anyway, like, this is going to be at least bring some short-term attention to MLW, which at a certain level, is never a bad thing. And let's face it, they need some big news coming back into the we'll call it the taping season, since they haven't since they hadn't made up or kind of made good for an October showing. But yeah, so there's the news of the week. Eric Bischoff coming in. I can be snarky all I want about it, but like, that's pretty big news. It's bound to set a good chunk of the wrestling world that doesn't care about the WWE or AEW on fire. So we'll see how that turns out. December 5th, Melrose Ballroom. Got a good month away off that one. So, yeah, let's take a break. And when we come back, we'll have Ace Darling to talk about his lengthy career in the realm of professional wrestling and see what he's up to now. So grab yourself an energy drink, get yourself a coffee, get yourself a coffee maker. I'll be back. Un momento. If you're like me, sometimes you need a pick-me-up to get you through the day. I drink Ray's Energy for that pickup. Ray's comes in a bunch of different flavors, and more recently Italian Ice, which is great, by the way. And it contains no sugar, so there's no crash after you drink it. And really, like, best of all, if you go through me and go to wetrepsports.com, use my code CASS, you get 15% off your order. So also, be like Cass, drink Ray's Energy. All right, we are back. MLW Confusion. As I said at the top of the show, I have a special guest in the studio with me. He is kind of an innovator, a big name of the independent scene of the 1990s, and you've probably seen him on DVD, whether you realized it or not. He is Ace Darling. Ace, how are you doing today?
Hey, Rob, I'm doing great. Thanks so much for reaching out.
Oh, not a problem. You've had a storied career throughout the industry, and like, I've first, like, kind of given everyone a background on it. Like, first kind of you kind of came into my radar. I'm old too. 20 years ago with some of the after mags,
Yeah.
and just seeing your name on like the top 10 lists at the end of every magazine and all that sort of good stuff. And then by proxy, we'll touch on this probably a bit later. Your appearances on Grandmasters of Wrestling, which is, I think that was the first time I actually seen you, because that was just before YouTube really took off. But I like to start off with the super original, never been asked before question
Mhm.
of, what sparked your love for professional wrestling? What got you like into the business as a fan?
As a fan, I was at my friend Eric's house. I was in sixth grade, so it was 1986, and his older brother had on. It was Hulk Hogan and Hillbilly Jim versus King Kong Bundy and Big John Studd, and I couldn't believe what I was watching, and it was the greatest thing I've ever seen in my life, and I've been hooked ever since. And it's so funny that if you fast forward 20 years later, I ended up being the trainer at King Kong Bundy's wrestling school, and he was the first match that got me into pro wrestling.
Ah, that is awesome. And Bundy's a guy you hear all sorts of stories about just kind of in general, especially the later half of his career when he was just basically hanging out in the Pennsylvania trifecta area, just doing shows whenever, or some of his later dealings with the WWE over, well, let's say, a pay dispute. I read a fun one recently about him turning down an appearance because he wasn't going to get the title that was promised to him back in like 1986. Um, but fast forwarding it to a bit, like, what pushed you into getting a career within the professional wrestling realm?
I always wanted to do it. So I was thinking my senior year of high school was 1992. I graduated. So I was 17 years old, and Larry Sharp had the Monster Factory in South Jersey. And it was like an hour and a half away, which really is not a big deal when you hear the stories of guys who traveled 4, 5, 6 hours just to train. So that was always my plan. Eventually, to go to Larry Sharp's Monster Factory, and that's a who's who in New Jersey of who's been through the Monster Factory, the Headbangers, Chris Candido, Bam Bam Bigelow. The Big Show started there. A lot of people, Balls Mahoney. But then it turns out that Iron Mike Sharp opened a school that was literally 15 minutes from my house, door to door. And I was 17. I went there. They said, "You have parental consent?" I said, "Sure." I didn't. And Monday, Wednesday, and Friday nights, we trained at Iron Mike Sharp's.
What was it like training under Iron Mike Sharp? He's another guy that has a lot of stories now that have come out over the years, specifically about his OCD. But what was it like specifically training under him?
Okay, we can do a podcast just on Mike Sharp. Yeah, he's very, very quirky. I don't know. Have you heard the story where he got locked into the building and they
Y-
released the dogs on him? Everyone knows that
Oh,
story, right?
I don't know if I heard that they released the dogs on him, but I've
Yeah,
heard that he's been locked in because he would well, numerous showers, but like his last shower was very, very
right,
long just in general, and that he got
right,
locked in.
right. I'll tell you this: Mike Sharp was a very nice man, a very honest man, but he wasn't a trainer. I never. He would never get in the ring with us. He got in the ring a few times before. Like I started, I guess the school was around for about a year when I joined up, and I heard from other guys that he would get in the ring, I guess, to train them so that they could train us, but never got in the ring with Mike Sharp. He wouldn't critique our matches. He wouldn't give us advice. Not that he wouldn't, he just didn't. Yeah, I mean, he was a great man. I'm very grateful that he opened the school, but all he really did was provide a ring, and we all had to kind of figure it out. Like there was a guy there named Bobby Piper who wrestled a few years already. He would help us out a lot. There was a guy there, Mike Tarris. He still wrestles as Mike Mars. He and I would just basically practice stuff on each other because there's no like there was no game plan. Like today we're gonna go over headlock takeovers, and then we're gonna go over how to work the leg. It was nothing. It was if you've been here 6 months, show the guys who signed up today what you know. If you've been here 2 years, show the guys who've been here 6 months. That's all it was.
That's crazy. I guess that's at a certain level kind of on point. I've heard with a lot of some of the older schools is that the name would open it up, and then it was just whomever.
Right, but at least they'd have a trainer. We had no
Right.
trainer. We had
Uh,
nobody. I'll tell you how I'm not burying Mike Sharp or his wrestling school because I made great friends there. I had a great time there. But I'll show you how disorganized it was. I joined up on a Friday night. Okay, so we practiced Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays, and then he'd have wrestling school shows every other Saturday in front of 15, 20, 25, 30 people. But to us as kids, it was like WrestleMania. So I joined up on a Friday. Okay. So then the following week, I trained Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. So that's 4 training sessions. That next day, Saturday, was a school show. I showed up and they needed somebody. They put me in a match after being in the ring 4 times, which is so
oh,
unsafe for myself, my opponent. Oh, yeah. Yeah. So,
uh, I've heard that too. I did an interview recently with Sam Holloway, and he's just like one of the wrestling schools like promised him that he'd be able to work like after a week, and he was even like, I don't know what your definition of working is,
right.
but that doesn't sound good, and,
Yeah.
and moved on from that one. But man, Iron Mike Sharp though, I'm disappointed like he wasn't a bit hands on because like we could joke about like with the stories about the things he could train because I joke that he's the loudest pro wrestler ever because he was always offense getting beaten just
Yeah,
yelling about.
just getting in the ring and just doing that will blow you up. That'll
Right.
make you that'll gas you, right? Just doing that. Mike Sharp was in unbelievable shape. And if you go back and watch the old house shows, Mike Sharp, he worked his butt off. He did not stop. He knew one motion, and that was go, go, go. He was a crowbar, like he'd hit you hard. He'd hit you really hard in there. He'd have to chop you and do all that. But Mike was just, if you weren't in shape, Mike was going to guzzle you up. 'Cause Mike could go.
I believe that. I brought that up on another show recently of just like yelling. I mean, like ask a singer. It takes a lot of work just to keep belting it out.
Mhm.
And singers, like okay, a lot of them do like we'll call it the equivalent of cardio running around the stage, but like that's what wrestling is, and just to be that vocal wrestling. It just like he had to have been a stamina machine, like even
Yeah.
like as like age kind of caught up with him, like still just listening to him go. Um, but kind of coming off this time period of your early years, I want to ask this too, and if it's wrong just because the internet says it's right, like that's fine. But according to Cage Match, you spent at least a handful of dates being Doink the Clown. Is that
Okay.
true?
So, okay, we'll back up a little further. No, this came first. So, uh, Dennis Corleone needed a doink. He needed a 3-day NWA weekend and he needed somebody. I did it. I hated every second of it. I was so embarrassed that I did it. But when you're 19 years old and you want to get booked, you're gonna take any booking you can get. So I did it. I hated it. It's just everybody's done the fake doink, but even better than this, I'll tell you this. So Dennis had that costume, and there was a promoter called John Gold who he would do like third party bookings. Like you book Nikolai Volkov at your day camp and John would set it up. So so John Gold called me up one day. He's like, so I got a $300 week booking. It's $100 for the doink costume. I'll give you $100 and I'm keeping $100. I'm like, okay, what is it? He goes, some kid's bar mitzvah wants Doink the Clown. So I dressed up in the, oh gosh, I'm so embarrassed, but I did it. I dressed up as Doink the Clown. There's some like 40-year-old accountant right now who thinks he had Doink the Clown in his bar mitzvah. It was me. Sorry to the Horowitz family. It was me. It was not Doink the Clown.
I just think it's funny because the time period on that was like the main Doink was still running, or like maybe not
Oh
Matt
yeah.
Bourne, but like Ray Apollo, like he was still on WWE TV.
Yep.
Like, so
Oh
he
yeah.
wasn't even like just making things on the indies yet, and people were already throwing Doinks out there.
Well, that was the thing. You would book because when Matt left, you would book Matt, and you probably back then you pay him $500, or you can have a costume made for $200 and stick Mike Moraldo in there as Doink the Clown. Yeah.
And just kind of piggybacking off of this, like during your stint doing enhancement work for the WWE, like did that ever come up, or was there anything that
Oh
like
no.
anybody referenced? Like
No,
no one knew until
no,
this podcast
no.
came out that you were
Yeah.
doing the.
But I mean, it was so just. It wasn't like I planned on doing anything with it. Like it's just something that I needed. He booked me that weekend and said, I need you to do this role, and I did it. But no, I mean, I've wrestled both the other. I wrestled Matt before. Gosh, we could do a podcast on my relationship with Matt Bourne. I have so many Matt Bourne stories. I wrestled Matt and Ray Apollo as Doink as well, so I got to wrestle both of them.
Have you wrestled like the full like WWF Doink Punch card? Have you wrestled Brawler and Steve Kern too?
Well, Steve Kern was my first match ever. I wrestled
Oh,
him. So I started training February '92. I graduated high school June '92. July '92, I did my first WWF TV. 4 months in, so green, wrestling Steve Kern, who could not have been a better first match. Unbelievable. I mean, Steve is just so damn talented, and he's such a pro. But he spoon fed me the match, and I was terrible. And you fast forward 30 years later, a couple years ago, I ran into him, and I said, Mr. Kern, you don't know who I am, but you are like a hero to me. And we text now, and he's come on my podcast, and yeah, Steve Kern's awesome. But I've wrestled if you name a heel between like '93 and '97, I've wrestled them. There's for the WWF, absolutely.
oh, okay. That is awesome though. Like nerd stuff, like TMI. Just last year, I was Bad Attitude era Steve Kern for Halloween.
Not
Like
real.
that.
Wow.
Yeah, like
No one had a clue who you were. I bet.
oh no one ever has a clue what I am anyway. But like I found a gold tuxedo jacket. I hand painted a pair of tights. Not the cool one with the world and the lightning bolt kind of thing, where they kind of borrowed off the Midnights. Got a bow tie. Got myself. It was supposed to be a Hulk Hogan skullet wig, and I had to like modify it so it was the 3-tiered mullet he had back in '94.
Nice.
And because I just throw it out there. Like Steve Kern is just underrated in general. Like
Yes.
there's a reason like at various points he was in the talking points in like the early '80s, like the early Flair era, being like one of the guys in the NWA. And then we just know him nowadays as mostly Skinner, which is a crime, really. Um,
True.
but but kind of piggybacking off that, but like since you kind of brought it up anyway, you spent like, I mean, at least in terms of years. I mean, obviously it's not consecutive. You weren't doing hundreds of dates, but like you spent like a good chunk of the '90s doing enhancement work for the WWF. Like, how did that initially come along, and then like kind of like what ended up keeping you? What kept you coming back?
Okay, so what started Mike Sharp's school doing enhancement work was, so like I said, I graduated in June of '92. Early July '92, the WWF was at. I'm from Jersey. It was at the Asbury Park Convention Center, and Tony Garea was there. So I went up to Tony Garea, just turned 18, have no business talking to Tony Garea. But I said, "Oh, Mr. Garea, I went to Mike Sharp's. I go to Mike Sharp's wrestling school because they're always in the Northeast." I said, "If you ever need enhancement guys, I'd love to come down." And he looked at me and goes, "Mike Sharp has a school?" And I was kind of worried that I just buried myself to Mike Sharp. So the next day in class, like, who told Tony? Oh, what the hell? Who told Tony Gray of his school? I'm like, oh, it was me. Um, so they wanted two things. They wanted either big guys, or they wanted guys who were like 200 pounds and who looked like they were athletic, and so that those are the two criteria they wanted. And I just happened to be one of the guys that went down there. I used to take amazing bumps, and yeah, I mean, I worked with Bastion Booger one time, and he gave me a clothesline. And I took this big 360. Same thing with Ludwig Borga. I took this big 360, and I just got known for taking bumps. So I literally, like, guys would be happy to work with me. I worked at Adam Bomb, and Raven was Johnny Polo at the time. And before I worked at anybody, he'd say, "This kid is a bump wizard." That was his exact words. So it was just cool to, know that I was there. I was going to enhance the guy, because let's face it, watch some '90s squash matches. Some of those guys just looks like they never saw the inside of a ring, let alone a gym. But it looks like they never saw the inside of a ring. So I think it was kind of a breath of fresh air that when I eventually worked for, say, Smoky Mountain TV, Jim Cornette said, "Oh, told all the guys, he is a breath of fresh air in the WWF TV matches." So I was just good at. I was great at taking bumps. I was great at making guys look good.
No, that's honestly probably one of the most important skills to have. I mean, I know that's you got you guys like in later years, Stevie Richards and say like JTG, who were like really good at putting guys over, and while being obviously very good wrestlers themselves. And I think that kind of kept them longer in the WWE machine than they probably would have
Sure.
otherwise. And well, again, as you kind of put it, like they call it enhancement talent for a reason. Like you
Right.
gotta get your opponents over. Um,
You mentioned Stevie Richards. My third or fourth day at Mike Sharp's wrestling school, Stevie Richards shows up, and he was nobody knew who Stevie Richards was. He was wrestling, 6 months longer than I was, and he came just to work out. He was from Philly, and I've known Stevie Richards since February '92. So that shows you how long I've known Stevie Richards for. Great guy, great talent.
I love Stevie also TMI for a while. Like his WWF theme was my ringtone, like in the early days of like cell phones. Like it got weird. Like the period they actually kind of like had him wrestle a lot around, like I think it was like 2003 or so with his fake no, I'm not gonna be able Static X theme, the Love Dump, or the fake version of Love Dump. But love Stevie, and catch his new show, or
Oh
newish show
yeah,
now,
love it.
like the Stevie Richards show. But you like kind of, since we're in the name dropping mode, like Ludwig Borga, what was it like working Ludwig Borga? That's another name that's kind of like half lost to history and then remembered for kind of, well, the right wrong reasons.
Remember before we clicked record, I said some guys just have good stories. You mentioned anybody, I got a story. So
Right.
it's never a simple answer with me. So
Perfect.
so I hope you don't. If I'm going on and on, just tell me. So again, I used to take great bumps and this and that. So I never worried to work with anybody. Here comes Ludwig Borg, and he comes up to me. He looks me dead in the face, And it's me, him, and Scott Steiner. Okay, Scott Steiner's just getting dressed. He looks at me, he comes real close to me, and he goes, "Tonight, I'm not going to curse, but he says, if you F up, I F you up." And he left. That's what he said to me. I was at Scott Steiner, and Scott Steiner was like, "Huh?" I'm like, "Yeah, huh?" And I wrestled him, and he said I was his favorite guy he ever worked with on TV. So, and Luna came up to me afterwards and said he can't work to save his life. You made him look like $1,000,000. So he was fine. He was no complaints at all. Actually, I'll find that match. I'll send it to you on Facebook later because just type Ludwig Borg and Mike Moraldo. Again, I take a clothesline bump for him that I'll put it up as one of the best bumps you're ever going to see.
Oh, nice. As I said, like you hear all the stories kind of about him. Well, now from nowadays of the things that have come out, especially like once he got into politics, and then you just hear how he just poor attitude, wasn't a good worker, and then his gimmick was like environmentalist, which probably didn't help him at least in the WWF. And then the
All I,
flips,
all I cared about was I just didn't want to get hurt.
right?
Just don't hurt me. I swear I'll take a bump for you. You don't have to kill me. That was my biggest thing. And he didn't hurt me. So
Good. And then working Bastion Booger, Mike Shaw. Like, what was it like? Kind of. Have you only done him? Have you only worked with him as Booger? Did you get to work with him in any of his other characters? Because he'd
no,
had a handful of others.
nope. I
Oh,
mean, you're just taking bumps for the guy.
yeah.
That's all you're doing. That finish he gives you is a shoot because you can't breathe. I mean, he's sitting on your face, 400 pounds. If he wants to stay there, you ain't going nowhere. So, no, he was fine. All the guys are
Like,
fine. I got to
yeah.
wrestle, but yeah, I wrestled Shawn Michaels, Owen Hart, the Quebecers, the Head Shrinkers, Too Cool, Headbangers. Just trying to think of all the different guys. Henry Godwin, Tatanka, Bam Bam Bigelow, Quang, Bob Holly, Bart Gunn. You name them. If they were there, I wrestled them.
And what was the? I guess we'll consider this kind of like an evolution question. Like how, like you were doing work. I mean, from 93, 94, clear up to about 99 or so. Like,
hmm
how had the locker room kind of like changed over the course of that time period? Especially because you were kind of an outsider, just coming in for a handful of dates at a time.
At first, when I went there, it was legit like, you're a job guy. These are contract guys. There's no in between. And then as the course of time went over, as the course of time happened, it was more like, okay, I'm not coming in just to get squashed. I'm coming in because now there's more competitive matches on television. So if they're bringing someone in, you have to be able to work. You have to be able, the days of just Bill the plumber who never, who's locked up 3 times, they're not getting called anymore. So, now you're getting called and you're doing competitive matches for the most part because you didn't see a lot of squash matches 98, 99 plus. I did myself and Crowbar when he was Devin Storm. We did a lot for them with the light heavyweight division, like 97, 98. So we weren't featured because like no one cared about the light heavyweight division, but at least you got an entrance and you had music and you weren't there as a piece of meat. You were there as a worker. You didn't wrestle. The WWF light heavyweight division wasn't taken seriously. There wasn't a lot of guys in it either. But at least when you were there, the pay was great, and it was a chance to be on TV. And again, you're not getting killed. If I'm on TV and I'm having a competitive match, guess what? That weekend on the Indies, even if I get squashed on TV, that weekend on the Indies, I'm selling a ton of pictures, a ton. So it was all good.
Like, how did you feel being kind of like stuck kind of in kind of that light heavyweight purgatory in WWF? Because I know almost exclusively for quite some time, like once 97 ish comes around, like you almost exclusively worked with Crowbar, which I mean that's kind of been a chunk of the story of like that period of your career anyway, both in and out of the WWE. But like,
Right.
was there like any hopes of, we'll say, achieving more, or like maybe even getting that contract, or did you just kind of look at it as just kind of a job and you're glad to be on TV, even if it was for 44 seconds on Raw?
Well, that match wasn't supposed to be 44 seconds. That match was supposed to be 10 minutes.
Oh
And
no.
and the promo that opened the show, that damn Bret Hart. Screw you, Bret Hart. He went like 3 minutes over, so they cut 3 minutes from our match, and then the next match went a minute over, and then the next match. So they kept cutting our match to right when we were ready to go out there. They said as soon as you get in the ring, you got to end it. That wasn't the plan. Originally, we had 8 minutes, so then we came back the next week and we did the match on a syndicated program that was pre-taped, so we got the 8 minutes. But to answer your question, I was just happy to be there. And did I want more? Yeah, but you know why I didn't get it? Because I tell this to all the young guys. I said I assumed that since I had talent and I was a good worker, that they would find me and they'd give me a job and they'd find something for me. Well, guess what? Everyone else is knocking on their doors, kicking down their doors, trying to get a job. So if you're not the squeaky wheel, you only have yourself to blame. So the only reason why I didn't go further is because I was an idiot and didn't think I needed to. I thought, okay, they know me. They're calling me up to do Raw. I'm working dark matches. I'm at the Meadowlands and Nassau and everywhere. They're here. I'm doing dark matches. They don't watch dark matches. They don't watch dark matches. They let me work with their guys because they knew I would not hurt their guys or the guys they're grooming for the dark matches. Guys who haven't made it to the main roster yet, they'd have them work dark matches in front of people with an experienced guy. I was a good hand. I was a good hand. I should have been focused on being a superstar, not a good hand. Yeah, I love getting booked, and I was just happy to be a pro wrestler and stay busy and active. But if you want something in this world and you're not kicking down every door and you're not being the biggest pain in the butt to get your goals, then the next guy who gets it deserves it more than you do. So that's why I didn't go further.
Right. That's something I've kind of learned basically through this podcast and just being able to talk to everyone that I've talked to is that, you have to treat yourself as a brand. And if you're not treating yourself as the brand and looking basically just like I'm going to be the best, but what's the best? The best is like this nebulous term. If you want the money, if you want the contract, like you are going to have to, it's who you know. And if you're not, I don't want to be like, if you're not willing to, but if you just don't think about it, because that's something I'm not going to lie, I'm guilty of that too, where I'm just like, I'm just going to do my thing and hope for the best.
Yeah. I mean, if you're focused on getting 5 stars and not focused on being a star, you're never going to make it. My buddy Tommy Fierro owns a wrestling collector. He does 80s con, 90s con. He runs ISPW Wrestling. I was at his store a couple weeks ago. He's got hundreds of magazines. I found like 12 right off the bat that I was in. I thought that's not looking at the magazine. You think Vince McMahon? You think Bruce Pritchard? You think Pat Patterson cares if your picture's in the magazine? You think he cares that you can take great bumps? Yeah, that's great. Again, to be a good hand, but that's not important when they're looking for superstars. So you really got. That's what I stress to everybody. If they tell me you want to make it in wrestling, I say, well, what are you doing to make it in wrestling? You're doing an indie show. Doesn't matter what you're doing an indie show. You got to make yourself a star and stand out from everybody else.
And I agree, and that's one thing. This is going to be my kind of like old man, my middle aged man yelling at clouds. So not quite old man yet, because I'm like, but I'm a big fan of like being able to set yourself apart via like a good gimmick. And I'm not going to say like, oh, you have to be the wrestling garbage man, but like, who's your character? Is your character just Johnny Wrestlegood? Like, okay, well, I hope your Johnny Wrestle's the best, because there's
exactly
100 other Johnny Wrestle goods. But then you had guys like coming out of like the pandemic, say like your War Horses or Danhausens, who just put their character work out there and come up with like and the creative use of social media, which is a boon, like a real boon nowadays, to really kind of put themselves out there. But kind of getting back to the point, but again, as you said that you've wrestled everybody, and I made note of this, and we did talk very briefly about it before the show. But Kurt Angle, you were one of Kurt Angle's first matches before coming on to television. Like, I mean, did you see the star written on Kurt Angle going into it? And was he as much of a natural as everyone kind of claimed to be, or did like being a natural still take 3 years of in-ring work?
Okay, so Kurt Angle. So the WWF would do like these seminars or these funkin' dojos during the week. They'd have up and coming guys, and they'd have guys who maybe they just got off an injury and needed to work off the ring rust. So they would work during the week. And then on the weekends, to give them experience in front of live people, they would do certain indie shows. I was always on those shows. So if you were coming up in the WWF system, I knew of you and you knew of me. So on the few of these shows were Kurt Angle. I had no idea what Kurt Angle was. I don't watch the Olympics. I don't watch anything. I go to nowadays. You know, I do. I play with my kids. And I go to sleep and I go to work. But back then, I didn't watch the Olympics. So I knew of Kurt. I saw him do. He did a dark match like TV before I was there with Brian Christopher, and then I see on the board it's me versus Kurt. So I go up to him again. I said hello to him at these indie shows, but didn't really spend any time with him. So hey, Kurt, we're working tonight. He goes, can you do me a favor? Can you call the match for me? And I said, so now 30 years later, it's pretty cool that I walked the green Kurt Angle through one of his first matches. Of course, Kurt. So we talk over the match, blah, blah, blah. And we're getting ready to go out. And Jim Ross is right there as we're getting ready to go out. And I think Kurt was assigned to one of their, it wasn't NXT back then. It was like Memphis or something. So he said to Kurt, oh, I was watching you. So it's me, Kurt, and Jim Ross. So I'm not like eavesdropping. I'm literally standing right next to him. So Jim Ross says, Kurt, you're getting better in the promos. He's never been on TV, remember, one of his first matches. You're getting better on the promos. Between that, your personality, and your Olympic background, you're going to be one hell of a pro. And I'm standing right next to Kurt Angle, and I look at him dead in the eye, and I go, were you in the Olympics? That's like saying to Ronald McDonald, do you ever order a cheeseburger anywhere? I asked Kurt Angle, who won the gold medal in the Olympics with a broken friggin' neck, was he in the Olympics? But again, the context is it was 1998 or 9. I had no idea who the man was. And he looked at me like I had crap pouring out of my ears and said, yeah, I won the Olympics. I won the gold medal in the Olympics. And right there, it was like Bruce Pritchard or Jerry Briscoe goes, go. So I went to the ring thinking Kurt Angle is going to kill me. But he was great. He was the match went off. We had a lot of time too. I'd say we had like 8-9 minutes, which is a long time for a dark match. And it went amazing. And Kurt was a natural. He was a natural.
And that's the stuff I hear about, like most universal. Just like Kurt's picked it up faster than anybody in the business. Kurt's done XYZ. And I mean, it it's easy to say that 20 years after the fact, right. But like we kind of forget that he worked. He trained like shortly after the Olympics, and then he did spend a year or so. I went like within the Funking Dojo, and I think it was Memphis that he was in. I have a match on my phone somewhere that I've saved of him. It's just a quick. Some guy thought he could suplex the the Olympic athlete, and then was shown what happens when you suplex the Olympic athlete. But I feel like that's a fun little like feather to have in your cap, is to have like pre-TV Kurt Angle, pre-3 Eyes Kurt Angle, yes. for those of you who remember that.
And it was at the Meadowlands Arena. That's the Brendan Byrne Arena. That's where like SummerSlam '89 was, and that was the arena that I went to as a kid. So getting to wrestle there was free. I got to wrestle him there, and I got to wrestle Crowbar there, and pretty cool.
Just pretty cool. Like, so how does that feel? Like what goes through your mind when you get to like walk through the curtain and kind of, well, one, you're like home turf in a full-on stadium, and then two, like say like in your WWEs where like that's kind of like everyone's gauge of success is to make it to the WWE, WWF. Like what goes through your mind as you're going through the curtain?
Everything happens so fast. It's like literally you don't have time to soak anything in. You just don't want to screw up. You don't want to look bad. You want to make the guy you're working with look good. But it's like I'll tell you this: like I wrestled, it was for WCW. But the first match I ever went to as a kid, my dad took me to the old Spectrum, the Philadelphia Spectrum. That's like where the Flyers played, and it was a big, huge stadium. So that was January 97. Excuse me, January 87. Yes, January 87. If you fast forward to February '97, so almost exactly 10 years later, I wrestled in that building, and that was I remember getting there and getting in the ring and looking up at the seats that I'm sure it wasn't the seats my dad and I, but it was up there. I said, wow, I was there 10 years ago. It was pretty damn cool. So again, I was never world champion. I was never made a dime wrestling really, but you do have cool moments, and there's some I just take and I just store it in this bald head of mine, and I just can enjoy it. So it is pretty cool.
I mean, really, like that's what wrestling is. Like, is like moments, especially like say for like someone like me who's never taken a bump, never been in a wrestling ring outside of like very like getting autographs or doing meet and greets. But like those are like the little things like maybe I won't be able to experience. Heck, in my case, not even experience winning a match, but like just thinking like, oh, I saw XYZ here, or I watched this
Sure.
happen in real time. Like, I mean, I think that's pretty darn cool, just in general. Like, and then you ultimately got to live that out, which I think is amazing. You did bring up WCW, and we haven't touched WCW yet. How did you land on WCW's doorstep?
Do you remember a promoter and a wrestler, the Boston Bad Boy, Tony Rumble?
I've heard the name, not
Okay,
familiar with his work.
sure. So he ran Boston, and he'd always bring me and Devin Storm in, and Kevin Sullivan and Bill DeMott worked those shows a lot. So I said to Kevin, hey, Kevin, because when Crowbar was Devin, he came in, he did the Indies, then he did, I don't know if he did ECW first and then went to WCW, but he did a few, something like that. But and then when he stopped, no, yes, because then he stopped ECW, and he and I decided to start teaming. But he had experience. He did that match. Do you remember that match he had with Conan? It was on Nitro. They brought him up for a few
I,
TVs. What? Long story
yeah.
short, they brought him up for a few TVs, and then he went to ECW. So he knew Kevin. Kevin didn't know me, but Kevin was familiar. Actually, I was good friends with. Remember Gary Michael Capetta?
Oh yeah, yeah.
Greatest man you're ever going to meet. And I don't talk about him enough or thank him enough. But he used to live by me, so I'd bring my tapes over as a kid, and he'd critique them for me. So I'm so indebted to Gary, and we're still friends. We're still friends to this day. He's not in Jersey anymore, but wonderful person. Love Gary Capetta. He gave Kevin a tape of mine back in the day, so Kevin knew who I was when he met me, and he kept saying, "Brother, I don't got a spot for you. I don't got a spot for you." So I finally one day I said to him, I said, Kevin, okay, can you book me? You don't need to hire me. Again, a lot of was that smart? Maybe. Was it dumb? Maybe. Because when you let somebody know that you're willing to not be in that spot, I'll give you a perfect example. Again, I told you I tell long stories. I used to get booked for this guy who booked me like 2 hours from my house and give me great paydays. 3 hours from my house and give me great paydays. But he'd run 10 minutes from my house and not book me. So finally I said to him, why you make me travel to all these far shows when last weekend you were 5 minutes from my house? He goes, those shows don't pay well. I said, well, let me know. I said, just if it's local, pay me less. I never got a good payoff from him after that. So when people know you're willing to do less, whatever. So that's my point. So I told Kevin, can you just book me? I just want to work. And he's like, yeah. He's like, I can definitely book you. And he first said, I'll put you in there with Benoit. I'll tell him not to eat you up, and have a good back and forth match. That didn't happen. He booked us, and because me and Crowbar started teaming at the time, and he brought us in to work with. Remember High Voltage?
Yeah.
Well, we wrestled High Voltage, and then later on that TV, Crowbar worked with Eddie Guerrero, and I worked with uh, Glacier. So then we start getting booked on a regular basis, and once again, they tried to book us for the 25 days in Disney. They used to do those
Mm.
summer things, and I was taking summer classes, and Crowbar was taking summer classes in college, and we said no, and they stopped calling. But hey, I got my college degree, so it's all a good thing. But so we wrestled a lot of teams. We wrestled Hall and Nash a few times. We wrestled Public Enemy, which was a blast because we knew those guys from Jersey and the East Coast. Teddy and Johnny. Oh gosh, Johnny Grunge. What a crazy man Johnny Grunge is. And Ted Petty, Rocco Rock. He's an unsung hero and just a tremendous wrestler. Tremendous wrestler. Who else we wrestle? Wrestled Joe Gomez. Remember the Renegade?
Yes.
Wrestled the Renegade. Remember Ice Train?
Oh yeah,
Oh
I'm a big
gosh.
Fire and Ice fan.
Really?
I
Well, you
mean,
didn't have to. You know why you're a big fan?
Scott Norton mostly, but
You know why else? Because you didn't have to. Because you didn't have to wrestle him. That's why.
oh yeah,
Oh, Ice Train was 400 pounds, and he felt like he was 1,400 pounds. He would just destroy you with everything he did. I said to him one time, I said, the second time we worked, I said, I swear, I'm gonna take a bump for you. Can you not kill me? He was awful, awful to work with. He would lay every bit of his 350 pounds into you. So he was a handful. He was definitely a handful.
that explained why Scott Norton got to go to the NWO and he just kind of got to hang out with Teddy Long for a bit when Teddy Long was not terribly relevant within
Mm,
WCW.
yeah, I wrestled when I wrestled him. Teddy Long was there, but it wasn't fun. It wasn't fun. He killed me, hit me so hard with a clothesline. Like something happened where we did something and he ran out of the corner and gave me a clothesline. You gotta try and picture this. So instead of he hit me with a clothesline, I take a flat back bump, land on my back. Okay, he hit me so hard that I kept rotating and landed like a javelin on the top of my head, upside down, straight into the mat. That's how hard he hit me. Yeah, you don't have to hit me that hard. I'm gonna take a bump for you, sir. But yeah, he was terrible.
The point of this sport is not to kill your opponent.
Yeah,
That's why it left the carnivals. But
yeah, yeah.
uh, kind of piggybacking off that too. Working with the Renegade, is he as horrible as everyone said?
It was myself and Crowbar versus him and Joe Gomez, and Renegade was. I mean, he was. We had a quick dark match. They'd fly me and Devin. We went to Minnesota and we did a dark match. I used to love that. It's fun. You get to wrestle in front of a huge crowd. You're not getting killed on TV, and you're getting so. I mean, he wasn't Eddie Guerrero. He wasn't very good. But but I enjoyed working with him. I didn't. I'm good at making people who can't work look like they can work, so I had no problem with the Renegade. Joe Gomez, by the way, nicest human being you're ever gonna meet. Super guy, super guy, Joe Gomez. First time I met him, uh, we wrestled, and then um, the next day we're getting on a plane. He says, I'm in Tampa. I have a tanning salon. I have a bar. If you're ever in the area, he says you come and you can tan and for free and drink at my bar for free. Guy never just met me, and I was nobody. I was the lowest guy on the totem pole in WCW. He didn't have to do that. It's just a sweetheart of a guy.
We don't hear too many stories about Joe Gomez. Like mostly it's just people kind of pointing and laughing about the like Pretty Boy stable that Teddy Long got to
Yeah.
manage. It was like just like random like
Jim
good looking guys.
Powers.
Yeah.
Yeah, Alex Wright. Yeah, yeah. Billy Kidman was he was my tag team partner before he became Billy Kidman, and one TV he said, "Yeah, I'm wrestling Joe Gomez." He wrestled Joe Gomez. How was Joe? He goes, "The nicest man you're ever gonna meet." So I had that in my head before I met him, and I met him, and yeah, he was a great dude.
That's good. You don't hear enough about the truly good dudes in wrestling. Like you always hear this like either the horror stories or I mean at worst maybe like the quirk stories of like that
Right.
guy's weird or that guy did this weird thing. Um, going back to the Outsiders, so like like you guys got like two tag team title shots with the Outsiders. Like how did that just kind of feel being able to challenge for the championship regardless of your placement on the card?
It's cool and it sucks all at the same time. See, I knew Kevin Nash and Scott Hall, by the way, great man. I don't care what anybody says. I'm not saying it because he's dead. Always super cool. I wrestled the Head Shrinkers for the WWF one time, and I came back in the locker room, and from across the room, this is like my third TV there. No one knew who I was. From across the room, he shouted to me. He goes, "You took an unbelievable bump for those guys." And then the next day, we're at some arena with an elevator. And I go in the elevator. It's me and Scott Hall going up. And he said again, he goes, you took an awesome bump for those guys. So Scott was always, and I remember I told you earlier, like there was job guys and then there's contract guys. Scott Hall would sit right next to you in the locker room. He didn't care. And he'd talk to you. Scott, super cool. I knew Kevin because I wrestled Kevin. I wrestled Kevin for WWF when he was Diesel. I wrestled him a few times. And again, I took a bump for him where he grabbed me by the throat. And all he did, I said to him, grab me by the throat and just do this. And I'm going to just dive over the top rope and look like you just killed me. And he's loved me ever since. I ran into him 30 years later. I said, hey, Kevin, I don't know if you remember me. He goes, you told me to grab you by the throat and choke slam you over the top rope backwards. And you remember that? He goes, it's not every day someone's willing to do that for you. So that, both of them are always super cool. So we wrestled them the 1 week. And then 2 weeks later, we're heading to TV. And Crowbar says he saw, like, you know, those bumpers before the show. Okay, and on this Saturday, on Monday night, you're going to see the Steiners versus Ace Darling and Devin Storm. That's what he told me he heard. So I went in there thinking we're going to wrestle the Steiners. So we get there, we're in the airport, and I hear, yo, and I turn around, and Kevin Nash is sitting there in a phone booth. He's sitting, and he's as tall as I am, standing. He goes, where are you guys going? Now, mind you, we were so young, we couldn't even rent cars. You had to be 23 to rent a car at that time. So we would get to an arena, we get to, an airport, we'd land, and we'd have to figure out, there was no Ubers back then, there was no cell phones. So you'd hope for the best. Hopefully you'd see one of the boys, or you hope, or, you know, you'd figure it out. So, okay, where are you guys going? Oh, we're trying to find a ride to the hotel. You're coming with me, boys. And he stayed at a different hotel, but he dropped us off first, and he paid for the hotel, and was just super cool and just down to earth, talked to us about the business and why he really left Vince McMahon and how much money he made with Vince and how he couldn't say no to WCW. So he says to me, at the airport, he goes, you're wrestling us tonight. And I go, I thought it was Steiners. He goes, who do you think's booking around here? He goes, you're wrestling us tonight. So obviously he liked us. And then, so that was the second match. And then Scott said, you know, we should do a third match where you guys get all the offense. He was serious too. Maybe he was ribbing me. I don't know. But he goes, well, you guys get all the offense. You know, we'll make it like, holy crap, but these guys are actually going to win. He goes, and then we'll beat you for the finish, of course. And that never happened, but maybe Scott was just ripping me.
I was with Scott. You never know, because he would do, like, again, this is all hearsay, but I know Chris Jericho told a story where Hall got mad at some member of management and basically just said, like, he was supposed to wrestle Jericho, and of
Beat
course
me.
he was supposed to beat Jericho, and he's just like, nah, you're gonna beat me tonight, kid. And like, yeah, he got his heat back like immediately after, but like still, like at that point, that was like one of the biggest wins of Jericho's career. So like I could see him just like saying, like, you know, let them, you know, get all the offense in, and then, you know, we'll stop it dead, or we'll, you know, cheat and then finish, or whatever, you know, whatever the plan he had in his head.
And all those guys were there. Jericho was there, young, Mysterio, Benoit, Guerrero, Malenko. I got to wrestle none of them. Kidman I wrestled Kidman, you know, 30 times on the indies and teamed with him a bunch, but never wrestled in WCW. Rey Mysterio was there. Never got to wrestle any of those guys in WCW. I wrestled Jeff Jarrett a bunch, but not in WCW.
And I think it's kind of interesting, like at this point, like WCW was hiring like everyone, and then like really kind of like pushing the cruiserweight division, like, and so even like the cruiserweight division had its full tier, like full card tiers. You know, you had your Rey Mysterios, and like to a lesser extent, it's like Eddie Guerrero, Chavo, etc. And then like even had like, you know, Ciclope, who would you know, never win or whatever. So I'm kind of surprised, like no shade intended, like you guys didn't get an offer out of it or pushed like within the lightweight division, kind of like you were in the WWF.
Again, they tried to book us more. I couldn't make it because I was in college. They don't want what do they want? They want me picking choose when they're gonna put me on their television program. But I wasn't gonna give up college, because what if I did? What where would I be today? You know, I'm 50 years old. You know, am I still gonna be wrestling? You know, so
That-
Again, I got no one to blame but myself. And how many people are going to say that? Not too many.
I mean, that's fair. And I mean, even like Jim Ross, it was very much get yourself the education first, then, you know, then, put everything on the back burner for professional wrestling
Right.
because, I mean, realistically, it can be all taken from you like in an
Of
instant,
course.
like one good ACL tear and, you're
Yeah.
done or like,
You're
God
never the
forbid, something
same.
worse.
Yeah. Yeah.
I want to compare the contrast, kind of like the backstage and or locker room environment between WWE and WCW. Like, how different was the environment between those two companies?
WWE, I always say this. WWE, there was a bunch of stars. There was a bunch of top guys. Uh, it was it just felt like there was like a class system. Like, there was the high class, there was the upper class, there was it's like society. There's the upper middle class, there's the middle class, there's the lower middle class, and then there's job guys. WCW, it just felt like there was a bunch of wrestlers there. It's like everyone was just a wrestler. Like, Sting was there in the locker room. The Giant, whoever. But everyone was just a wrestler there. It just seemed like everyone. And plus, we knew, like, I knew Bill DeMott. Love Bill DeMott. We knew Bill DeMott. We knew Public Enemy. So we knew these guys. And but by then, a lot of people, like Chris Jericho, goes, "Oh, I know who you are." Like, people just knew you because I've been wrestling for 6 years, tearing it up on the indies. So people treated you just a little better. Like, it was like I'd go to DDP and I'd say, "Can you watch my match?" You would just talk to people. It was just different. WWF, it just seemed like everyone was more on eggshells, and it was more like, all right, this is our job. We have to do it a certain way. You have to act a certain way. WCW is just people having fun and wrestling.
I think that's the most positive thing I've ever heard about the WCW backstage. Not gonna lie.
We gotta understand, I wasn't there enough that no one was holding me back. No one was stabbing me in the back because I was there to make guys look good. Like Buff Bag. I wrestled Buff Bagwell. Not actually, I never wrestled him in WCW. I wrestled him on Indies. But we had 12 great minutes. We laughed the whole time. Why? Because I'm there. I know my role. What's your finish, Buff? What do you want to do tonight, Buff? I'm not going in there and saying, "Oh, I want to get my shit in." Excuse me. I said I wasn't going to curse tonight. We'll get my stuff out. I'm going to get my stuff in. We have a 12-minute match. I'm getting my stuff in. He's not going to bump me for 12 minutes. So it's all in the person too. Like, none of that stuff bothers me. I was just happy to be there.
That's fair. Um, okay. I promised a fairly limited length of time, and so there are just a couple of things like I do want to touch on before I let you go, and hopefully it won't take super long, but it'll I'll let you talk as long as you want, man.
I'm good if you're good,
Um,
buddy. I'm good if you're good.
you said and I didn't catch this and like it slipped through the cracks. You did training with at King Kong Bunny's school. Like
Mhm.
how did like one like kind of like how did that come about? Like two, what was it like kind of like working underneath him to train up and coming wrestlers? And then like three, like how did you how did you kind of like transition into that trainer role?
How did it happen? Bundy wanted to open a school. He and I were super tight. We got along great, and he asked me if I would be his trainer. Trying to think what else your question was. It was. I'll tell you this. It lasted about a year because it's just hard to get guys to. Everyone wants to join up, but no one wants to pay. No one wants to pay. He had a nice building for a while there. It was going well, and then you just run out of students. Run out of students. I'll tell you this. Physically, though, it was rough. It was rough because I'm the guy in there constantly. I noticed that's when that year that I was there took the most out of me physically. Like, it left me, like, I noticed, like, when I started that year, when I ended that year physically, I took a lot of bumps off my bump chart, off my bump card that year for sure. So I would have done a lot less if I if I can do something different and go back, I would have taken a lot less bumps because it it was just it was bumping for 4 hours, and you're the guy teaching the new guys, and they're landing on you, and they're so yeah, it was physically it was a lot more demanding than I thought it was going to be. So, but it was fun, and I love Bundy. He's a great guy.
So I ask because I know, I mean, just with any job, some people like just really like take to the training aspect of it, or just realize like, oh, like I'm actually, I'm actually am a good teacher, and that once they finally kind of like get into the row, and like some guys like find out like that's kind of like their hidden passion or whatnot. And I didn't know if that would kind of be the case with you, or if that was just kind of just another steady paycheck within unsteady business.
Wasn't a steady paycheck, I'll tell you
Yeah,
that. Definitely wasn't
I
a steady
know.
paycheck. Anything I've done in wrestling, I've done it for the love of the game rather than for the paycheck. Because it's on my level, you don't do it for the paycheck. I did really enjoy teaching, but I always felt like I never became a star. So like, how can I teach someone how to be a star? So I kind of felt weird that I was a trainer. It kind of like I felt like I was a trainer because no one else was going to be the trainer. But I could definitely teach guys how to take bumps and do them safely and walk up and work the arm and hit the ropes. But I always felt like you needed someone with a name value if you were to open a school. Like, if Joe Blow is a great technician and he works every weekend at the local armory, yeah, he could teach you how to work, but can he teach you the business aspect? Because obviously I wasn't good at the business aspect of wrestling if I didn't make myself a star. So I always felt a little weird that I was a trainer, but it's not like he had 500 students come and go. He had a handful of guys, and yeah, that's
Right.
that's that.
Well, and you bring up a good point with the wrestling schools. Is like they're like some of them you kind of got like kind of got a name for themselves in and of themselves. So you kind of are like, oh yeah, okay, that's that school, and then you just list off a batch of people that went there, and then you have others, and I'll use a local example because I'm unabashed Quad City, and but we have the Black and the Brave Wrestling Academy. But when people go, what's a Black and Brave? I don't talk about Crotch and Merrick Brave. I'm like, that's Seth Rollins' school. Like then people are like, oh yeah, okay, I know what a Seth Rollins is. Um,
You need that. You need that. I mean,
it's good marketing.
you need a King Kong Bundy, but and he would watch. You need critique. But this is the first interview and the last interview you're ever gonna have where a wrestler says he was too much of a jabroni to be a trainer at a wrestling school, and he is the reason why he didn't become more successful in pro wrestling. And it has nothing to do with like bad. I didn't have any bad habits. It wasn't like did drugs or anything. I didn't do it because I didn't pursue it hard enough. You're never gonna have someone come out here and be dishonest. You're welcome.
Another notch on the belt. Like as I said, wrestling is filled with moments. Bam! There's another moment
There
for
we
me.
go.
Uh, coming off the training thing. I'm gonna throw a name out there if you don't know, if you don't remember him, or again, internet's mistaken.
hmm
But this is just I saw a name pop up under your wrestlers trained, and it popped me. But Zane Madrix, Skeeter McCoy. Do you remember that name?
I I remember. Was his real name Sean? Do you know him?
That I'm not sure.
Okay. Well,
If you don't, that's
if
fine.
this is Ty Sean,
Like
then yes.
I mean, maybe I don't know, maybe do I have my cage match pulled up right now?
I
Here,
really
no,
didn't train.
here's
I
the
don't say I ever trained anybody. Like, I mean, I guess I trained Bundy's guys, but none of them really went on
yeah.
to work much.
Yeah. Well, and again, this is the internet, so you never quite know. Okay, I'm pulling up. Okay, it's not going to list his not going to list his real name on here. Okay, that's because I'm just using Cage Match, so I'm not a good researcher, but it pulled up with Mike Quackenbush and Ace Darling as his trainers, and I just popped me. Well, and I know Quackenbush had a hand in training. Again, this is kind of now we're getting off to the sides to come where I'm coming from. But he was he at the very earliest like Chikara shows. He was kind of he wrestled a handful of matches for them, and Quackenbush had since done like 20 years after the fact a commentary on some of those very old shows, and he really talked about like what a weird dude Zane Madrix was, and I
Wait,
just like it,
I think it's Skeeter.
Skeeter McCoy. Like he used Skeeter McCoy and or Zane Madrix, depending on where he was working. But
No,
but
now I want to see it.
he he
Zane
he,
Madrix.
he wrestled like
Oh,
for only like 2 or 3 years, and I'm not sure how many matches he actually had. I know he worked a couple matches for Chikara, a couple matches for IWA Mid South, and that would have been about 2002, 2003 or so. But I don't know. That's just me like scraping the bottom of the barrel, just because
yeah.
like to be known as a weird guy in the realm of professional wrestling like means you are quite the strange duck. So, all right. Well, I apologize for wasting everyone's time
No,
picking that one.
hit me with like, what was it like hanging out with Randy Savage? You're going with Skeeter, Skeeter Zane something. Come on, bro. Come on.
Hey, one thing I was taught early is don't be like the other podcasts. Don't ask the exact same questions. And I've already asked like too many. Like, what was it like? What was it like? And like I do like as much as I just name drop Skeeter McCoy. Like I do try to totally avoid like just play like which. Some of you should have you back. We'll just play. We'll just play like first impressions, like names from a hat.
Okay.
Like I'll just draw out some like legend name, and like you'll tell me like what it was like hanging out with them or whatnot. But no, it's just one of those like little nerd things, and that's I warned you before you came on. Like I said I ask questions that interest me. That was one of them. Okay, so we'll dial it back. So something less obscure, but I referenced it at the top of the show. And then we'll kind of talk about what you're doing now. But the Grandmasters of Wrestling, Maccabee Mania. Did you ever think something like that would just like take off like the way it did? I mean, granted, like nearly 10 years after the fact, like what's it like looking back at it now? Like now that we can get a dollar DVD
So
of a pretty young.
there's two Maccabee Manias. There was so in '93, the guy Jeff Buchanan came to Mike Sharp's wrestling school, and I didn't know who he was. He wasn't a wrestler, and it turns out he was like a champion fencer, and he was part of like this like Jewish fencing club, and he wanted to have a show in his. It was like the front of his house, like the little driving area, like a cul-de-sac. So he got a. It was like like if you're like a basketball fan, you pay the money to go fantasy camp with the New York Knicks. That's what he did with indie wrestling. So he had a legend show, and the main event was him and Ken Patera versus Mike Sharp and the Iron Sheik. And all he had on there was legends. So he came to the school, talked to Mike about stuff, and I said to him, I said, if you get a minute, I said, you want to watch me and my friend Mike Towers? We if you need one match it's going to be different than the rest of your matches, have us do it. He watched us and said, yep, you're on. So then fast forward a couple years later, he had Maccabee Mania 2 because there were so many unanswered questions from Maccabee Mania 1. And it was me versus Crowbar, and that was Dawn Marie's. I always thought it was Dawn's first match. I've been thinking for 20 years that was Dawn's first match, but then when she came on my podcast and we were catching up, it was her second match. So that was Dawn Marie's second match, and the main event was Mighty Maccabee versus the Iron Sheik. And this, I'm going to say March, they're having Maccabee Mania 3. Bigger, better,
Nice.
better. Remember WrestleMania 3? Bigger.
Yes.
Yeah. So they have a Maccabee Mania 3. But yeah, it turns out that they got these DVDs in the dollar section, and they sold like 1 million copies. Everyone's like, "Oh, did you get paid?" And I'm like, "No." Like, do you care? I'm like, "No." Are you kidding me? I was in a dollar DVD section at Walmart. I have a stack of them in my attic. Are you kidding me? When I'm long and dead, my kids can say, Grandpa was on this DVD. That's pretty damn cool. But yeah, it was so the first Maccabee Mania was the day of WrestleMania 9. So we wrestled on the show, and Baron Mikhail Cicluna was there, Nikolai Volkov, Iron Sheik. I'm trying to think of other names he had on the show. He had Misty Blue. There's a women's match. I don't remember the rest of the matches.
Yeah, so
Dominic
Von
Danucci.
Reschke and
Baron
Danucci.
Von yeah. So at night we stuck around and we watched WrestleMania 9 with Ken Patera.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, so that was fun. And then Maccabee Mania 2 and Maccabee Mania 3.
And like it's something we all like kind of point and laugh at now, but like it was basically a fan. Like the show was a fan running like a dream card for himself. Like let's be realistic about it.
Yeah,
And two, it was for charity. Like it was a charity event. So maybe we can point and laugh at like the quality of everything, but just in the end of the day, it netted like at least the second one. I think like I saw an article fairly recently, and they ran like they had the numbers, and it like got like 10 grand for the Maccabea games for the fencing team.
sure.
Like so,
Now
like
I'll tell you this, like, so I was at Jeff, the Mighty Maccabee. By the way, he knows it's funny. Like, he doesn't take himself seriously at all. He gets it. But it was him. So my buddy Tommy Fierro, who's at the Wrestling Collector, Stockholm, New Jersey. People, if you're going to be in the area, make sure you stop by the Wrestling Collector. He had Ken Patera for a signing about a month ago, and Jeff showed up. Ken Patera. So Jeff was at the store, and we're hanging out, blah blah. So people were there to meet Ken Patera. They're talking to us, blah blah blah. And every time I see Jeff, I'd say to somebody, "You know who this guy is?" And they're like, "No." I'm like, "The Mighty Maccabee." And I'm telling you, a lot of people knew who the Mighty Maccabee was. Yeah, true story. Actually, I'll tell you this. Hold on. Look what I got signed at at the store. Jeff brought me one. I know this is an audio podcast, but here's a poster from the original Maccabee Mania, and it's signed by Ken Patera and the Mighty Maccabee.
oh
So I
nice.
had this from my man cave when my kid who's in college eventually graduates and moves out, which I don't want him to, but when he does, his room is going to be the coolest. I have so much wrestling merch. Yeah, good times, man. I didn't make money, but I made a lot of friends, so good times.
This, as I said, like it's one of those like it kind of lives in infamy now, but I will be the first to point out that it was those events were for charity. So you point and laugh all you want, but it did good for the world, or at least the forget the full like team name, but the American Jewish fencing Maccabea Games fencing team.
Right.
Um, but all right, so we got that one, and we took an hour, got that one out of the way. But let's talk about the now. So like, what are you up to now? What like you're still kind of like in the periphery of the world of professional wrestling. Like, so you have wrestling then and now. Like, how did that come about? And kind of like what do you do for that?
So you can subscribe to my wrestling YouTube channel, Wrestling Then and Now. Uh, I'm just lucky, I've been nice to people my whole life. So when I go up to a Bill Eadie or a Barry Darso or a Ted DiBiase, guys who have no business giving me the time of day, because my buddy Tommy Fierro runs all these conventions, so I always help him out. So I'm spending weekends with these guys. And, once people know you're a good dude, I say, hey, would you mind coming on my podcast? And there's some people like a Paul London who knew me before he started wrestling. So, or like a Darren Young who, like, when he was breaking in, I was the experienced indie guy, so I helped him out. So guys will do my show in that case. But I've been doing this about 2+ years. I have probably 150 different wrestlers. I mean, I've had Bubba Ray Dudley on. I've had Bushwhacker Luke. I've had, like I said, Ted DiBiase. I've had Mosh Thrasher, Scotty Too Hottie. I'm gonna forget names because just so many. Rene Dupree, Paul London, Brian Kendricks, a lot of guys. Like I said, Ahmed Johnson, D.O. Brown. D.O.'s a good friend, old buddy of mine. That was D.O. Brown's tryout match at Smoky Mountain Wrestling. Just a little footnote in history right there. So I try and celebrate the guy and have him on, and I'll tell you this though, it's very time consuming, very low reward as far as monetary. Like there's
Preach to the choir in that one.
oh very low, and very low with the views a lot of times. Like I'll have a guy who shouldn't, like I'll throw myself under the bus. Someone like myself who got a lot of views, and I'll have like a Hall of Famer on and no one watches. So I don't. You know what it is too. I think there's so much competition right now. Undertaker started one. Buff Bagwell started one. Why are you gonna listen to my podcast? But I got a lot of great guests. I mean, just in a week, like 3 weeks ago, I recorded with, remember WCW's Ranger Ross?
Oh
Remember
yeah,
him?
yeah.
B. Brian Blair and Mark Henry all in the same week. Like I put the work in, but I don't know. I don't know if I'm going to pull the plug in soon or going to keep doing it. I don't know. But for now, it's just more of a passion project. Wrestling Then and Now on YouTube. My buddy, my neighbor, my buddy John said one day, he's like, "You should have a YouTube channel." And I'm like, "No one cares about me." He's like, "Well, you have all these connections, and I get to go to a lot of cool things through Tommy, like 80s Con or 90s Con. So I get to see a lot of cool things. So now I can actually put it out there for the world to see. I thought it'd be bigger by now, and I thought this would be a part-time job or a full-time job. But again, again, like I always said, the people who made it in wrestling and I didn't, you gotta respect them because they're doing something you're not. These people who are out there, the Mr. Beasts, or all these guys, or the guy Hannibal, this guy's got hundreds of thousands of subscribers. They're putting the work in. They put in a lot longer than I have, so they deserve the credit. That's really all I'm doing for wrestling, though. I go to some. I don't go to appearances for me, of course, but I go for like this weekend. I think Tommy has Slick and Danny Davis at his store, so I might head up there just to hang out. Wrestling Then and Now on Facebook, Wrestling Then and Now on TikTok, Wrestling Then and Now on Instagram, WWF Golden Era on Instagram, Mike Moraldo on Facebook. If anyone wants to shoot me a friend request, shoot me a hello. I'd love to hear from you. That's really it.
Right on. And I'll if I do my due diligence, I will have links to at least the Instagram, Facebook group,
Cool.
and YouTube on there too, so people can have hopefully a one-stop
Awesome.
shop that are interested in that. But with that, I think we're gonna wind it down. We just hit you up on where you are on the socials, and we've run a touch longer than I said we were going to, but so. I do appreciate it though. It's really cool talking to you, and I am like half serious. Like I'm gonna like come up like with an appropriate list of names, and like maybe a handful of months down the road, we could play name association.
Cool. We'll do part 2. My pleasure.
There we go. But thank you for coming on. It was greatly appreciated. I had a lot of fun.
Me too. Thanks, Rob.
MLW Confusion is a weekly podcast that is written and performed by Rob Kammer and hosted by Spotify for podcasters. MLW Confusion is part of the Urban Wrestling Network, and you can check them out and check out the Major League Pod on YouTube at Urban Wrestling NW. The background music for this section is Ruined by Day, performed by Alan Schroeder. If you enjoyed this podcast and would like to support, please like, subscribe, and tell your friends, family, and enemies. Leaving a review is also helpful. Word of mouth of advertisement is very important for small podcasts such as this. Social media links can be found in the description, but Twitter and Instagram are at the Nova of Cass, TheNovaofCass, and Facebook is at MLW Confusion, all one word. If you'd like to support monetarily and help upgrade my equipment, please check out my virtual chip jar at ko-fi.com/Casanova. Or if you prefer more bang for your buck, you can go to patreon.com/Casanova, CASSONOVA, whereas for as little as $2, backers get access to the podcast early and without those pesky ads, plus other exclusive content. So join the crew that is headed up by Keith Wynn, Alan Schroeder, Alex McCarthy, and Elenia, and check it out. You can also find t-shirts, coffee mugs, and other merch at the Confusion Podcast on Teespring. Also, be sure to check out the description to find some affiliate links for, well, WWE merch, coffee machines, ice makers, and much more. For business inquiries such as ads and sponsorships, please email rzkammer, that's Kamerer, at comcast.net. Thank you for listening.